Hello and good day. My name is Craig DeLarge, and I'm a change leadership strategist and consultant with the consultancy Wise Working. And I'm here today with my good friend Michael from Highp Video Messaging, a healthcare communications and education service that I've been following for a number of years and whose work I'm really impressed with. How are you today, Michael?
Very good, Greg. Thanks for having me here.
Indeed. So, I'm always very interested in my own practice in understanding how the industry is adapting to changes that are going on in the environment. And we know that this last couple of years has really been challenging for healthcare and life sciences marketers to the extent that the pandemic has pretty much cut representatives off, as well as medical scientific liaisons. They've been cut off from being able to see practitioners live. I'd be really interested in hearing first off, a bit about Highp and how you guys have been adapting to the needs of the current market.
Thanks. It's an excellent question, and you're absolutely right. Working with pharmaceutical companies across the globe, in over 40 countries, from Americas, Europe, Asia Pacific, we do see a common thread, and that is that pharmaceutical companies are looking for innovative ways of engaging with physicians. And Highp video communication does just that. We are able, thanks to a Highp video message, we are able to deliver a message to a physician via an uncluttered channel of communication. And it's a video message that contains personalized, or I'd like to refer to it as a micro-personalized message coming from a representative or MSL based on an existing relationship. So the results are truly impressive.
Very nice. And I like this idea of personalization. One of the things that I've always liked about your service is the degree to which you find an asynchronous way of delivering something that's similar to a representative actually being in the office. So, one of the things that brings us together in this conversation, and I'm really excited about it, is a case book that you guys have recently published. I was taking a look at it just yesterday and really impressed with some of the examples and case studies that I saw in it. Can you tell us a little bit about the case book itself?
Sure, Greg. That case book is a compilation of our vast experience of deploying Highp across 42 countries across the globe. If I'm not mistaken, we have delivered a Highp message to over 700,000, nearly 1 million physicians across the globe. And in the casebook, we are sharing the statistics, the figures, including some 5 very specific use cases. 5 use cases coming directly from Pharma. Use of Highp video messaging by an OTC company. Use of Highp video messages to deliver Congress highlights to physicians, summarized highlights from major medical congresses. Another very interesting use case of medical teams utilizing Highp video messages to break through the email clutter. We also, in the casebook, we are also featuring an example of Highp video messaging used by the inside sales teams. And finally, an interesting example coming from the Gulf region, where Highp is being utilized to deliver micro-learning content to physicians. So lots of statistics, lots of figures based on Highp deployments across the globe, including some very interesting specific use cases.
In looking at the casebook, I really loved the degree to which the cases that you cite span across multiple geographies, but also use a number of common cases that healthcare and life science marketers grapple with across the value chain of communication, you might say. And a number of different cases addressing in the office scenario, as well as you talked about the inside sales scenario. So that was really quite nice. So in a nutshell, in order to get some interest around this case book, what are the key takeaways that you want those that interact with the case book to go away with?
Greg, in our opinion, for the digital communication to work, and those takeaways are not really a rocket science. These are some commonly known practices, but yet obviously important to highlight. First of all, in order for that digital communication to work, it has to be based on, we believe, it has to be based on a relationship that
Yes.
representative or MSL developed over the years. And that representative or MSL would then be a natural orchestrator of that communication with HCPs.
Yes.
Imagine, Greg, for a moment, receiving a Highp video message from, or an email or a WhatsApp message from a source that you're not familiar with. Would you open it? The chances are not very likely. But now imagine receiving that very same message from a representative or MSL who developed that relationship with you over time. The chances of you opening that message are significantly greater. So, very first important point to highlight that relationship. Relationship plays a very important role. But certainly, relationship is not everything. Context of the message. Importance for physicians to understand, why am I receiving this message? What's the context? That's the second very important element. And finally, the third, perceived value of the message by an HCP. So the relationship, the context, and the perceived value of the message. Those are the three elements that, in our opinion, have a very, very significant impact on the engagement rates.
I love how you describe that combination of relationship, context, and value. One of the things that I really enjoyed about interacting with the case book is how for each of the cases, you tell the story of the case, but then you offer the perspective of the customer, the perspective of the marketer. So you kind of get both sides of the value that's created in that interaction, and then an external expert review, which was a really nice, credible combination for how they were presented. And it was quite interesting to hear the healthcare professionals that received the Highp communications talk about how, particularly during the pandemic time, where it was surprising to me, doctors professing that they actually missed the personal interaction with their representatives.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And then noting that to get this message, that was not just the generic sort of email that they, or text message that they tend to get from companies, but to get something that actually featured the representative who they had a relationship with, which kind of reminded them of that connection. And I remember in one case, the professional said, wow, I was really happy to see this representative who's not been able to come into the office. I thought that that was a really excellent differentiation in terms of the sort of experience that marketers are able to deliver with the Highp video messaging that is not always there otherwise. All righty. Very good. Thank you for that. So, one of the things that I noticed in looking at the casebook is you use this terminology, orchestration, as you talk about how Highp can work as a standalone, or it can be integrated into larger multi-channel or omnichannel marketing programs. One of the things I was interested in hearing from you, would you say that when you use the term orchestration, is that something different than multi-channel and omnichannel marketing, or is it the same?
Well, Greg, in my opinion, that main difference between omni-channel and multi-channel is that omni-channel involves all channels and revolves around your customer, while multi-channel involves many channels and
Yeah.
it often revolves around your product.
Yes.
Now, the casebook talks about the importance of orchestration. And orchestration in omni-channel is, the way we see it, is the process of creating that personalized customer journey
Yes.
across different channels. that will allow companies to provide a seamless experience to physicians, to their
Yeah.
customers. That's the way we see it.
Very nice. I love how you talk about this differentiation between multi-channel and omnichannel as product-centered in one case and customer-centered in the other. And I think we know that as marketers, we're always grappling with how to find the right balance between those, and also knowing where within a product life cycle and a given marketing or competitive situation, we need to emphasize one versus the other. And I think it's really nice that in your cases, you show examples of how you can actually address both of those particular situations. Very nice. Very
Absolutely.
nice. So, one of the things that really come out in looking at the different cases is executions in different parts of the world, right? So there are examples of work that's done in Europe, work that's done in the Middle East, and I think that there's a case in Asia, actually. I'd be interested to hear from you. Are there any kind of thematic differences in culture, execution, context that kind of come out when you think about different Highp executions that have been done in different regions of the world?
Obviously, they're pretty similar from the standpoint of the pandemic, the limitation that the pandemic brought upon us, that
Yeah.
lack of ability to see, to connect with the customers face to face. We've seen different rates of adaptation depending on the region. In countries, regions very heavily touched by the pandemic, that willingness to open up to new novel forms of communication was significantly greater versus countries where those face-to-face meetings were allowed. One of the key common denominators is, and I'm sure you've seen this in many markets across the globe, is that overabundance of emails. What we've seen in the very early days of the pandemic is that a lot of our pharma clients, faced with that lack of face-to-face interaction, had to rely on pretty much on what they had, and in the majority of the cases, it was the email communication. So yes, we've seen HCPs overwhelmed with a number of emails that they've received from pharma. Shortly after, pharmaceutical companies started to search and were trying to identify those novel form of communications on how to break through the clutter, and this is where Highp comes in.
So then this leads to another question that comes up for me.
Sure.
It's really cool to hear about how you allowed companies to differentiate within email. And certainly there's the understanding that the delivery of your messages kind of focus within email or SMS. Have you found over the last couple of years that there's been a significant growth in the ability to reach physicians through SMS and text messaging as a parallel to email itself?
We are seeing that, certainly, that being the case, that being the trend, and we are
Yeah.
also seeing that the results, that the text communication or Highp video communication delivered via text are significantly better than a traditional emailing campaigns. Again, there are three elements that are crucial when it comes to that Highp video communication delivered via text. The three I've mentioned: the relationship, ensuring that your customer, physician, receives a message from the source that they're familiar with, from their representative or MSL, that they clearly understand the context of that message. Why am I receiving that Highp video message via text? And then finally, the most important element, that perceived value of that message.
Very nice, very nice. You know, when I've thought about the use of SMS and text, and the idea that for many, I think for most, text has a level of intimacy
Sure.
and kind of uh, the messages you get through text tend to be more personal from
Yeah.
people that you really know versus email, which is a bit less, not even a bit, I would say a lot less intimate. And so it's occurred to me that when you get that text message, the ability to actually make that text message communication with a familiar face and a familiar face that's live, like the two of us right now talking to one another,
Right.
is a real capability advantage that, again, reflected in the comments that we see in the cases, doctors that get these messages seem to really appreciate. Let me ask you this: when you think about differences in professional specializations, right? Um, cardiologists versus primary care versus oncologists, and you think about trends or differences in how these different specialty audiences respond to hype campaigns. Are there any trends that kind of come up for you that can be cited in that regard?
Yes and no. Very much depends, or a lot of it depends on the level of relationship that pharma was able to build with those particular HCPs.
Yeah.
So again, that being the key. Also, one of the things that I've noticed in the early days, early weeks, months of the pandemic was that some of our pharmaceutical customers were very careful in delivering a communication to specific therapeutical areas,
Yeah.
specific target groups, mainly those who were fighting the pandemic in the front lines. Here, that communication was very carefully evaluated.
Yeah.
If even any communication can be sent, certainly not promotional communication.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen that a lot of this communication was mainly based on the ways that we can support you, ways that we can help.
Yes.
Those would be the main key differences.
Very nice. And so, what I like there is it shows the diversity. It really gets back to this idea of context that you talked about
Absolutely.
earlier, right? And the diversity of messaging. So as we think about this, it's not just talking constantly about our product this, our product that, a new indication, so forth, so on, but really making this messaging a part of not just the relationship that the representative has with the professional apart from the product, but also making it an arm of the medical and even customer service communications.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, exactly. So this now gets into the dear doctor sorts of communications that we often think about. Okay. Have you seen a lot of utilization of hype, not just with the representative and the MSL, but also with key opinion leaders, which we know is such an important part of how we educate the professionals that we work with in the industry?
It's an excellent question, Greg, and thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
We do see a lot of our pharma customers relying on a support of the key opinion leaders, thought leaders
Yeah.
in their Highp video communication. Highp video communication often contains a short video from a key opinion leader, and it's simply that sort of communication adds credibility
Yes.
to the content being shared.
Yeah.
Some of the examples that immediately come to mind: Congress highlights. We see, obviously, these days all the events are either online or hybrid. And we do see that physicians don't necessarily have the time to spend hours participating in those online events.
Yes.
With the power of Highp, we are able to deliver a message with a 3-5 minute summary of the key developments of day one of an event, day two of a conference,
Yes.
and those developments are summarized by the leading local or international key opinion leaders. So that's one example. And
Yeah.
the other example that also comes to mind are the micro-learning campaigns delivered by a Highp.
Yeah.
Educational content delivered to physicians by the thought leaders, by key opinion leaders. The casebook features one of those examples in the field of pulmonology. So
Okay, so thank you for that. So now we know that before the pandemic, there were a number of trends in the space that we were seeing in terms of how we market to healthcare professionals. Live access to doctors was already waning. Doctor fatigue with over communication through email and other channels, that was already happening. What the pandemic did, or rather, is it accelerated. So opportunity accelerated, but also barriers accelerated. I'm really interested to get your take from where you've been sitting and how you've been executing with your clients and customers. What kind of stands out for you as to the opportunities and the barriers that have both been accelerated in the last couple of years by the pandemic itself?
In terms of the opportunities that we've seen and witnessed in the very early days of the pandemic, is certainly pharmaceutical clients were searching, looking for alternative ways of reaching out to their customers. Email was no longer working. There was an overabundance of email communication. In terms of barriers, consents, communication consents. In order for digital communication to work, pharmaceutical companies certainly needed to have that consent from physician to be able to send and deliver the message to them. So it's one of the barriers that we have witnessed. Connectmedica has, and a Highp video communication team has a great solution for consent collection, and also the casebook touches on that point.
So email consent is a challenge. I have to believe that SMS consent is a whole other
Oh,
challenge
absolutely.
that has to be worked with. Okay, very nice. Well, while we're on this page of managing barriers and challenges, um, as marketers think about using Highp as a service, are there other sorts of barriers that you would kind of call up and say, as you think about doing more personalized communication of this sort in new channels like SMS, a relatively new channel, what are other sorts of preparations or lessons learned to manage potential barriers and setbacks that you would offer to marketers to think about coming in?
Making sure that the sales team is on board. The worst case scenario is the head office coming up with idea of introducing a innovative digital communication channel, and sales team not buying into this idea. So certainly making sure that the whole organization is on board, that you have that necessary buy-in of your sales team, of your leadership team. So this would be one of the key elements. The other point that I think is important to mention is the whole aspect of video communication. Video communication has been around for many of years, but now as we are conducting video recordings in a very heavily regulated space,
Yes.
pharma, obviously that knowledge on how to conduct that proper video recording. There are some very basic things like the background, like the source of light, audio, all of that needs to be shared with the teams, with the various teams, and to ensure that that they're comfortable with it, that this is something that they will be able to conduct on a regular basis.
Okay, very good, very good. Yeah, things that we often don't think about, but that we need to. And I think this is particularly the case for small to medium size brands and companies that don't always have the resources to have a lot of agency support, but who actually look to do a lot of what you would call DIY or do it yourself,
Absolutely.
logistics and production and marketing and that sort of thing. Okay. So then this is a nice lead into the next question that I had. So with every new era in marketing, with every um, emergence of new technologies in every new situation, marketers have to think about new skills and practices that they have to develop. This is particularly the case for marketing heads of marketing and marketing directors who have to be constantly developing their staffs. I'm interested to get your take on, as we move again into more use of email/SMS delivered, video based, highly contextualized and personalized communication. What are the new skills and practices that heads of marketing and marketing directors need to be developing within their teams and staff?
One of the things that we've seen, and we've seen this across sales and marketing, one of the common themes is that constant search for new opportunities to gain HCP's attention. Are emails really working? And if not, should we perhaps open up to novel forms of communication so that openness to try new things, that openness to obviously venture into new opportunities, that openness to take a risk, pilot versus approaches, test various novel communication approaches is certainly one of the skills that would differentiate those who follow behind, those mediocre players from the leaders in digital communication space.
So, the future is always emerging. You talked about microlearning, which is one of my favorite cases within your case. And we know that constantly within marketing, we read every day about how artificial intelligence and now there's the metaverse and, all of these new things will continue to emerge in the space. Tell me, what does the future look like to you? In the next 2 to 5 years, how do you think this space will evolve? And how will video messaging like Highp have an impact on that?
Thanks for the excellent question. We do see pharmaceutical industry divided into two groups. Those who believe in pure digital, those who believe in building the relationships with HCPs via digital means alone. Yeah. And the second group, and that second group, Greg, is where I belong to, those who believe that a mix of face-to-face and digital delivers the best results. Yeah. Those who believe that representative and the relationship that he or she developed over the years will have an impact on HCP's engagement rates in the digital space. Finally, those who believe that it's the representative or the MSL who is the orchestrator of the digital communication campaigns. So I believe this is where the future is taking us. It has to be a communication based on relationship. And again, a proper mix of face-to-face and digital communication.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. In 25 years of working in the digital health space myself, I clearly see and agree with this combination you talk about of relationship, context, and value, right? So starting with how we communicate out of a good relationship, customizing what we have to say within a particular context, right? Is it education? Is it promotion? Is it
right.
Is it the representative, or rather, is it marketing, or is it medical, right? Is it a particular culture from Asia to Middle Asia to, Europe and the West? And then what is the value, which is couched in understanding the needs of the customer? And the technology is always just a carrier of that. It is not the originator of it. And that's what's exciting about seeing how you guys have really innovated in this particular space and allowed the personal to match up with what I'll call the asynchronous. That's really how I think about Highp myself. So I like that. And it also brings up for me this saying. I was chatting with a colleague the other day, and we were talking about how technology will not replace the medical scientific liaison and the representative.
Oh, absolutely.
But representatives and medical scientific liaisons that use technology will replace those who don't. Right?
I love it.
So we're worried about the technology replacing. No, it's the professional using technology well that will replace the one who doesn't. And it's really cool to see. And I personally am grateful for the role that Highp video messaging plays within that. So thank you. So this has been a great discussion today. Thank you for making the time, Michael. It was really great seeing the case book. And it really educated me about some things that I'd not been aware of. And I'll be looking for opportunities to actually use your service within my own consulting practice. So thank you again very much.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for the opportunity.